Hi everyone. So I just watched Toy Story 3. Um, a lot of you might ask yourself, why would I be reviewing Toy Story? Well, actually, I haven't watched the other two movies, but Toy Story 3, I really, really like this movie, and I'm sure it's special in that it is a bit different than the other two movies. I haven't watched the other two movies, but I'm sure it's different. And now I will explain to you why it is different, because this is a typical example of, one of those stories that you can watch as a child, and then later on you can watch them again as an adult, and it turns out it's a completely different story from what you thought it was as a child. So it works on two entirely different levels. Of course, actually, the most obvious thing, the most obvious way to do this is like with dirty jokes, with which children will not get. And then there are some of those in there as well, but that's not what I'm talking about. Uh, it's actually it's a really touching story. Actually, I think children do get the story. They just will not get the references, but they will understand basically what it is about. They will get it on an emotional level. Uh, so, Toy Story 3, believe it or not, and there have been many series about this, and many people have been saying that. Many famous critics have been saying that, so I'm not the only one who's saying that. Toy Story 3 is actually, believe it or not, it addresses serious topics. Basically, it's about a gulag or a forced labor camp. Some people have also, said it's a concentration camp. But whatever you call it, it's basically the same thing. And it's kind of an knowledge, it's not directly about that, obviously, because it's a children's movie. But it has some symbolism in it that goes very much into that direction, and it's kind of similar it's similar to the My Little Pony episode I talked about earlier that addressed communism. That episode does it too. You could, in the beginning, they have like this leader, and he promises them like this kind of utopia, and he uses a lot of promises and arguments that are typical for communists. I'm referring to the pink teddy bear, which is basically their leader in that utopia. Of course, in actuality, in Toy Story, that utopia is just a kindergarten, but actually it's a daycare center. But the way it is presented is really like a kind of utopia that, of course, turns out to be a dystopia. So the promises he makes are not kept. And he uses some. It's really how shall I put this? Okay, I'm just gonna explain the story. You probably know it, but you probably you will realize what it is about when I tell you the story in this way. So the toys have basically been abandoned by their owner, which is the child. Forgot what his name was. Because, well, the child grew up. So he doesn't need the toys anymore, and the toys have basically been abandoned. Originally, they're planning on hiding in the attic. Some people have also said, okay, this is kind of similar to how Anne Frank was hiding in the attic from the Nazis. So anyway, originally they're planning on hiding on the attic, but this doesn't really work out. Mainly because they don't want to hide in the attic. They think that their owner will throw them away. He doesn't actually want to throw them away, but they believe that he will throw them away. So they don't want to go to the attic because they think if they go there, they will just be thrown away. Then they hear about this daycare center. So instead they go to the daycare center, and the daycare center is really presented as a kind of utopia. And this is made clear when they arrive there and they see all this. It is represented like a utopia, like basically the perfect place for toys to be. And this is reinforced by the pink teddy bear, which is basically the leader in that daycare center. I mean, he's the leader of the toys, more or less. And he reinforces that image and, tells them how nice they would have it there. And that... previously they've basically been oppressed by their owners, and that toys should not have owners, even though this was, in the past, this was kind of like the rule, that toys must have owners, and, that they must do what the owner tells them. But he kind of... incites them to rebel against their owners, saying that toys don't need owners, and they're better off when they're free and stuff, and that they should rebel against their owner, basically, and they don't need owners, and they should just live in that utopia on their own, without owners. And this sounds all great and good, so they're convinced, even though Woody tells them to go back to their owner, but they don't listen to Woody, and they stay at the daycare center. So, as soon as they decide to stay there, it of course turns out that none of what they have been promised is true. The daycare center is not a utopia, it's actually a dystopia, and now it starts to get really, really creepy, because from now on, this is basically... this is basically a gulag, and it has some stuff in there that is really not appropriate in a children's movie, but this is presented in a way that is acceptable to children, because they will not get that all of what comes now is a reference to gulags. So anyway, they're basically imprisoned there, and it really turns out to be a gulag. Buzz gets basically brainwashed, and it really is brainwashing. They show it that way. He gets strapped to a chair, and basically tortured, and literally reprogrammed to obey their new leader. And the others, of course, the others are dissatisfied, and with the living conditions there, because they constantly get abused by the kids, and and actually it's the imagery is kind of graphic, considering that this really is a movie for young children. It is not, but the toys have, if you see it, they get smashed and banged and they dismantled by the kids, and some of the toys have clay on them, and the clay is really made to look like it is blood. Of course, they can't show blood, but it really is. It looks like blood. So they get abused terribly. And of course, the toys are dissatisfied with that, so they get locked up in tiny little cages. And whoever is dissatisfied with being locked up in tiny little cages gets locked up in an even worse place, which is a dark hole outside on the campgrounds, basically. Of course, it's the it's the courtyard, but it's made to look like the campgrounds of a labor camp. So anyway, whoever is dissatisfied with being locked up in tiny little cages gets locked up in an even basically gets thrown into a dark pit. Which in this case, of course, is the sandbox, but it is made to look like a dark pit, and it is and it gets covered on top, and they're basically thrown into this earth pit without any light. It's dark, and it's dirty, and they kept in there for for days, or at least for the whole night, and. Yeah, so it's that sort of thing, and it goes it goes even further. Later on in the movie, the daycare center turns more and more into a labor camp, and the imagery is really that of a forced labor camp, with guard towers everywhere and guards everywhere and cameras everywhere, surveillance everywhere, and basically what is their equivalent of forced labor and, abuse. There's even some subtle hint at sexual abuse. But of course this is made very subtle because it's a kids movie, but there are hints like that. And the whole thing ends, well, it's made clear toward the end that there is only one way out of this, what is basically a labor camp, and that's basically through the chimney. The only way out is if they're broken and they get thrown away. And basically at that point the toys are dead. They're dead. That's their only way to escape is to be dead and then get thrown in the garbage and then get thrown into the incinerator. And that's exactly what ends up happening. The leader personally throws them. First, he sets them a trap. They think that they're escaping, but of course it's all a trap by the leader. And then he personally throws them into the garbage disposal thingy. Then they get shipped off to no. Do you call it shipped off? Anyway, they get driven. They get driven to the garbage dump with the incinerator. So they get driven to this incinerator. And the leader, the pink bear, is there again, and he has the opportunity to rescue them, but he basically personally lets them burn in the incinerator. And that's basically how the movie ends. Now you would say, no, that's not how the movie ends. The movie has a happy ending. Of course it has a happy ending, because this is a children's movie. Movie. I mean, you know what I mean. A children's movie after all. So they have to have a happy ending. But in my opinion, and a lot of people have said that happy ending is not the real ending. Because I noticed something, and a lot of people have noticed that. Before they get thrown in the incinerator, it's nighttime, and the entire movie is very dark, and it's nighttime. Then it takes like 5 minutes, and they come out of the incinerator again, and it seems like they have survived the incinerator. But then it's suddenly daytime, and the entire remainder of the movie, it's very, very bright, unnaturally bright. And then only good things happen. Well, at least to the good guys, only good things happen. And to the bad guy, the leader, bad things happen. He basically gets strapped, with all his 4 limbs exposed, kind of like Prometheus. But the good guys, they basically get their good rewards. and all the good things happen, and it's only bright. And the movie ends with a fade to the sky. So, and before all that happens, before all the good stuff starts happening, they're in the incinerator. And it looks like there is no way out. You know, there were some, they were trying to escape, but you know, the leader basically set them another trap and lets them burn in the incinerator. And they realize, okay, there's no way out anymore, and they're about to die. And they all start holding hands. And yeah, that's basically what happens. So a lot of people, think that they really did burn in the incinerator, and that makes sense. And that everything that happens afterwards is basically the afterlife for toys. And I think that's certainly one way to interpret it. And I think that's actually what they were trying to get across there. It's just that they can't make it too obvious either, because then it wouldn't be a children's movie anymore. Anyway, since I just watched that movie, I thought it was something, you know, it was interesting, and was interesting to talk about. Maybe some of you have not catch those references and that symbolism. If you haven't, just watch it again. I think now you will spot the references and the symbolism. And I really like movies like that. In that sense, some movies that apparently were made for children are much actually much have a much more deeper meaning to them than most of the movies and stories that are made for adults. You know, what's a movie? You know, if you Google movie made for adults or something, adult movie, write that into Google and see what kind of movies you will get. You know, because what you will get will be pornos, pornos. So. And compared with a porno or whatever, which is what is usually considered an adult film, right? So I think if you compare Toy Story with an adult film, you will realize that Toy Story has a much deeper plot and has much more to offer plot-wise, and is a much smarter, much more intelligent movie than what would be considered an adult movie, right? So, in that sense, some of the movies that apparently are made for kids are actually really good movies, and some of the movies that are made for adults are actually really bad movies. And a good example of this is, of course, I said that before. You know, I like My Little Pony, not because I'm gay and like little ponies or something, but because some of the stories are also like that. You know, they have deeper meaning to them. And I said that before, communism has actually also been addressed in My Little Pony in a very interesting and very educational way. And another good example of that, which everyone knows, and which I gave in the past, is Gulliver's Travels. Because when I was a child, this was presented to me as a story for children. And then when I read it again, when I was older, I realized this is anything but a story for children. It's actually a very, very smart story with a lot of symbolism in it, and it's it's really a satire of humanity. But because many adults don't get that, they regard it as a story for children.